The journey of life comes with the joy, blessings, challenges, opportunities, and growth. We tend to be reminded by the negative aspect that challenges bring, but not the growth it comes with. Growth does not come with comfort, neither is it achieved in an environment we are familiar with. Sometimes it is scary, the changes growth comes with. Changes in physical features, emotional, mental, and spiritual. It comes with achievement as well. Achieving the goals you've set and setting new standards for yourself do not come easy, but they are worth trying. With the years ahead of me, all that I envision for is not to give up on my growth and transformation. Celebrate every win I encounter on the journey. Make room for improvement whilst I let God do the rest. In all, the most important aspect for me is God's timing, which is Kairos.
Thank you all for being here today. And before we could start for today's session, which is day one, I would like to convey a few words about Allied Academics conferences. The Allied Academic Conferences every year hosts interdisciplinary international conference worldwide on cutting-edge basic and applied research in life sciences, pharma, medicine, healthcare, and nursing, which is delivered by the best talents in the industry and academia. Our conferences are oriented to drive the scientific community at large, facilitating access to the newest technical and scientific achievements, and to shape future research directions through the publication of applied and theoretical research findings of the highest quality. Bound together, Allied Academics has transformed into a prominent choice for the experts and academicians to display their marvelous duties. The distributor gives pursuers and creators an aggregate stage to confer their work to the overall gathering. Allied Academics aims to gather the researchers, principal investigators, experts, and researchers working under academia and healthcare industry, business delegates, scientists, and students across the globe to provide an international forum for dissemination of original research results, new ideas, and practical development experiences. This academic occasion is to revitalize the enduring connections and flash with new peers across the globe. We heartfully thank you for joining us to witness the advances in this field together. I would like to thank all speakers, delegates, students, and event partners for their continued support and patronage. The organizing committee of the conferences wishes to thank all the staff of the editorial board and organizing committee members who have toiled their efforts to bring their meeting together. Finally, we thank each and every one of you, the participants at this conference, and we hope you will enjoy the conference and your participation will contribute to new collaborations and research initiatives. Let's begin with our keynote session. So our first keynote speaker is Kwame Seusu, which is myself, actually. I have to introduce myself. So I'm from Essex Partnership University, NHS Foundation Trust, UK. Something brief about myself is I'm a young Ghanaian-born individual who grew up in Edmonton in North London. I am also a graduate of pharmacy and a multifaceted individual who is currently a Band 5 hospital mental health trainee pharmacist in the NHS, and also an award-winning social activist who has been recognized by the Black Impact Awards in 2021 and the Diana Awards 2022 for the works in mental health advocacy using my social media platform and online conferences. So now I would like to move on with this privilege to actually start with my keynote speaking, which is about a topic which is very dear to my heart due to the recent kind of challenges that the NHS is facing. So my topic is, could pharmacists be the new GPs in the NHS? The dynamics surrounding the role of pharmacists in the NHS has caused a lot of stirs from other healthcare professionals and patients. Pharmacy is known to be one of the fastest growing healthcare professionals, whereby changes in their roles is seen at least every decade. The role of clinical pharmacists in the practice is causing a certain degree of confusion of what the future role of a pharmacist would be defined as. At the beginning of my Master of Pharmacy degree in 2016, pharmacists were hardly seen in the GP practice, as mostly they were easily located in the community at the pharmacy on the high street or in the pharmacy at the chain supermarket. However, the evolution of making the role of pharmacists more clinical in the community, as seen in the hospital, has birthed the primary care networks, which is also known as the PCNs, for pharmacists to work synergistically with their general practitioner, which is your GP, and other healthcare professionals in multiple practice sites within the same network. This is whilst the role of practice-based clinical pharmacists is still functioning within various practices across England. According to the British Medical Association, the BMA, the reason for offering clinical pharmacists and PCNs a space in the practice is due to the reduced availability of GPs, to enable increased access to healthcare, to reduce workload in various GP practices, and save the cost of hiring GP locums. This has forced this role to be mainstream in the NHS since 2019. The similarity between the role of these practice-based clinical pharmacists and PCNs in the practice of that of the GPs, as seen by patients and other healthcare professionals, have caused questions to be asked if the role of the pharmacist is slowly replacing that of the GP. This talk is by no means designed to talk down on the role of the GP in the modern NHS. However, it is rather to shed light on the role that practice-based pharmacists and PCNs are playing in various GP practices. Now, let us delve into why this notion is so and discuss the varying roles and responsibilities of pharmacists contributing under the NHS. General practitioners are doctors based in primary care in the GP practice and are responsible for treating all common medical conditions and refer patients to hospitals and other medical services for urgent and specialist treatment. Their role is extensive, therefore, their knowledge and skills cut across various systems of the body, such as cardiovascular, endocrine, and other systems. This depicts the depth in knowledge and skills that possesses compared to other healthcare professionals in the community. This makes them significant as they are the first point of contact with patients before referral can be made to secondary care or specialist care. Also, GPs are involved in the educational supervision of practice-based clinical pharmacists, practice nurses, paramedics, GP registrars, medical students, and foundation doctors. This makes them one of the backbones of the NHS. Clinical pharmacists are highly qualified experts in medicines, which their service is increasingly needed as a vital working force as part of the general practice team. They are either stationed at their practice to become a practice-based clinical pharmacist or work in multiple sites within the network as a PCN pharmacist. They have a varying role in the GP team, such as carrying out structured medication reviews for patients with ongoing health problems, improving patient safety, outcomes and value through a person-centered care approach, circulating the MHRA alert within the practice to GPs, and reviewing or updating medical changes in hospital correspondence, such as discharge summary letters. However, the demand for more clinical pharmacists have led to employing more practice-based clinical pharmacists and PCN pharmacists. There has been a successful pilot which has shown the beneficial role of practice-based clinical pharmacists to patients. Since 2015, that the NHS England Clinical Pharmacists in General Practice program was introduced, there are currently more than 1,000 full-time equivalent clinical pharmacists who are working across England. As part of the NHS long-term plan, the NHS is committed to increasing the number of healthcare professionals, including clinical pharmacists, working in primary care so that there is easier access to expert healthcare professionals for their needs through convenient appointments. As a result, in January 2019, the new GP 5-year contract framework was launched to support the primary care networks to recruit up to additional 20,000 staff to work in primary care teams. This includes PCN pharmacists, physician associates, and other healthcare professionals. The PCNs are formed to meet the needs of the GP practices by working together with community, mental health, social care, pharmacy, hospital, and voluntary services in their local areas. This is to support patients with chronic conditions such as diabetes and heart disease across multiple practices sites within the same group, as the population in England is increasing since the inception of the NHS in 1948. The PCNs were built on existing primary care services, and by 2014, it is predicted that a typical PCN will include 5 PCN pharmacists, which the NHS England will fund 70% of the cost of each professional on the PCN. The changes to the independent prescribing course for pharmacists since 2022 has made it easier for pharmacists, especially clinical pharmacists, to be able to develop their skills, knowledge, and qualifications to support GP practices. Roles such as reviewing repeat prescriptions and even prescribing medicines for patients within their scope of competence can be performed by a clinical pharmacist. This change has shifted some of the responsibilities of GPs who were solely able to prescribe medicines in their practice to now sharing their role with clinical pharmacists, PCN pharmacists, and other healthcare professionals. With this qualification within the practice, therefore, most prescription queries can now be easily handled by clinical pharmacists or PCN pharmacists in their practice. The independent prescribing qualification, which used to be accredited only after 2 years of relevant experience after qualifying as a pharmacist, has now been incorporated into the curriculum of various schools of pharmacies across England since 2022. Therefore, newly qualified pharmacists from 2026 onwards will automatically be able to prescribe medicines to patients from day one after being on the register of the pharmacy register. The cost of employing clinical pharmacists in the practice as part of the PCN costs between 35,000 to 45,000 annually. However, the savings that this could produce for the practice is beyond this amount. Therefore, it comes to say that the benefits of having clinical pharmacists within the practice does not limit to only healthcare benefits to patients. However, this has financial implications as well. My fellow pharmacist colleagues would support the assertion that the emergence of PCNs has been beneficial to practices. However, its impact on community pharmacy is not the same. This is because it has led to the shortages of pharmacists to run community pharmacies due to low salary and poorer working conditions. Therefore, most community pharmacies have no option than to resort to either local pharmacists at a negotiated rate, or they are left with no option than to close their pharmacies. Unfortunately, it has been exposed by Lloyd's Pharmacy to be closing their 237 pharmacies in Sainsbury's outlets. Some of the reasons resulting to this is shared to be because of insufficient government funding, which has caused changes to the market conditions. These closures are therefore overstretching nearby pharmacies and diluting patient access, particularly in deprived communities. If this trend continues without the government intervention, the future of community pharmacy is looking bleak. In my opinion, the role of the GP cannot be phased out in the primary care, as there is a distinct role that both the GP and the clinical pharmacist play in improving the health of patients, either for acute or chronic condition, based on differences in the number of years of their training and depth of their knowledge. The reality of modern healthcare system advances in treatment and complexity of conditions presented in the primary care require the use of a greater clinical skills and the synergistic collaboration between the clinical pharmacist and the GP would enable this to be achieved, rather than the role of clinical pharmacist being shifted to replace that of the GP. Thank you. Without wasting much time, I would like to open the floor for any questions or comments concerning my talk, please.
I got a question.
Yes.
What's the difference between a GP and a pharmacist? See, the training is different, isn't it? GP is trained as a doctor, because my wife is a gynecologist, I understand. But pharmacists, they only study and they know how to treat.
Yes.
So if there's a case of diagnosis, say with a skin disease or something, can a pharmacist do the job?
Thank you very much. So the difference between a GP and a clinical pharmacist, there's a very distinct differences between them. A GP goes to university to study about 6 to 7 years, called the pre-reg or the foundation training year, which is now being called. Then afterwards, they actually get onto the field. The depth of knowledge in terms of diagnosis is actually greater on the part of the GP because they are doctors. They get to see the anatomy of the body and everything. However, a pharmacist is an expert in medicine. Therefore, their collaboration helps to end up actually treating the patient's condition because the pharmacist is an expert in their field when it comes to medicine, and the GP is also an expert when it comes to the body. However, there is a level of diagnosis that is being taught in the School of Pharmacy, similarly to a level number of drugs that the GP might actually know, but not to the level of the pharmacist. Hence, both the GP and the pharmacist need each other. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have got any question?
One more question, Ken.
One more question, there you go.
Just, is it because the GPs are shortage in this country? That's why you wanted to make someone to replace them to do the pharmacists to take over.
So
why the NHS not recruiting now? Doctors are on strike. Last couple of days back, I think last week they did it.
Yes.
Now the consultants are going to do this week, I think.
Yeah.
And again, it's going to because the government is not listening.
Yes.
So is it because of the number of doctors less? That's why you're asking somebody to do the job.
I have to actually answer this question unbiasedly. So in terms of the creation of roles in the GP practice, it really started way before the strikes actually happened. As made mention in my talk that the population of England is actually growing, and also due to the complexity of the conditions that are presented in the GP, it needs the role of the clinical pharmacist as well. In hindsight, there is also shortages of GPs, henceforth there is a bigger workload in the practice compared to before then. Henceforth, they are using the services of the clinical pharmacist to support the GP rather than replacing the GP. So we are there to also play our role using our clinical knowledge to support the workload. So some of the roles that a GP used to perform back then is now being transferred to that of the clinical pharmacist because they have got the skills and a level of knowledge, but they have not entirely taken over the practice, and as made in the conclusion that the role of the GP wouldn't phase out, and we hope that the government listens to doctors and nurses so that their role is as relevant as we want it. It will still be more stronger and reinstated, because if that carries on, the pressure will fall onto pharmacists. As made mention that right now community pharmacy is actually suffering due to shortages, as most pharmacists are taking the route of the PCN, which is the primary care network, because they feel more valued and they feel more pay, they receive more salary in that field than being the community pharmacy. So it's kind of the checks and the balances that we have to actually make sure that we are playing it well, which I believe that as time goes on, it will become much better, and I hope that the government actually responds to them positively.
Thank you.
You're welcome.